Where you live in the world is one of the most important factors to consider in the design of your solar system. I have spent years testing different types of solar panels as well as different mounting options, from roof mounted to open rack mounted and even vertically mounted panels. The problem is all my test data is from Ohio, and you want to know how it compares to where you live at your latitude. To answer your request, I've done a significant amount of analysis to bring you relevant data no matter where you live, from the equator all the way to the Arctic Circle. Welcome back to Projects with Everyday Dave. It's time to look at some data. I had my oldest son teach me how to program in Python so we could write a program to aggregate thousands of data points in a meaningful visual way. I picked 16 locations starting from Brazil at the equator to above the Arctic Circle at the northern edge of my home state of Alaska. You know, if you cut Alaska in half, Texas would be the third largest state. I just had to throw that in there. I've tried to select large cities or locations that are close to each latitude interval that I'm trying to analyze to make it more relevant and a little bit more interesting. I'm going to focus on the northern hemisphere, but the results should apply to the southern hemisphere in a similar way if you just have an array facing north instead of south. For the analysis, I used weather data processed through the National Renewable Energy Laboratory's PV Watts calculator, and I found it to represent my actual data results pretty well. It also makes it really easy for you to reproduce exactly what I did if your location is a little bit different than what I've shown in this data. Today's analysis will cover south-facing open rack arrays at every angle from horizontal 0 degrees to completely vertical at a 90-degree array. To make the charts easier to quickly digest, I've used a heat map style coloring for all the different angles. In addition, I've used dots and dashes to make 3 of the typical setups a little easier to pick out. 0 degrees is red and dotted and represents a horizontal array such as a carport. 30 degrees is the yellow dot dashed line, like my fixed open rack array. And 90 degrees is the dark blue dashed line representing the south-facing vertical array, like a fence. The analysis assumes bifacial panels which can produce power from both sides, and it assumes a 10 kilowatt array. That makes it representative for a typical home system, and it's easy to scale to compare to your own project. For instance, if you have a 20 kilowatt array, you can just multiply these results times 2. And if you have a 5 kilowatt array, you can just cut these results in half to estimate the production for your setup. The vertical axis is the total production for the month in kilowatt hours, and the horizontal axis is each month as a number from January to December. If you have a month with higher power demands, this chart will make it easier to see which angle maximizes those months. The chart at the top right is the total yearly production in megawatt hours at each tilt angle. For instance, if you have net metering by the year and all you care about is which angle is going to give you the most production for the year, you can quickly pick it from this chart. In this case, somewhere between 0 and 10 degrees will maximize the yearly production. Now that you know how to read the charts, let's digest the data. We'll start at the equator, 0 degrees latitude. No surprise here, horizontal or nearly horizontal panels provide the highest total production for the year at 15 megawatt hours. Vertical panels are not a great choice, coming in at less than half the production, 7 megawatt hours. Like me, you might be thinking a vertical array on the equator should perform better facing east-west instead of north-south. I did run those numbers, and it is much better, coming in at 11.5 megawatt hours. But that still far underperforms the horizontal panels. Of course, that would give you a completely different hourly production throughout the day, as we have seen in previous videos. But that's an analysis for another video. If you're looking for even production throughout the year, stay close to the horizontal layout. Moving up 5 degrees of latitude, the shape of the curve is largely the same, favoring a horizontal panel layout. The total yearly production dropped from 15 megawatt hours to 13 megawatt hours. However, that drop is due mostly to local weather. And that's easy to see as we move up to 10 degrees latitude, where we have yearly totals exceeding 15 megawatt hours. However, horizontal is no longer the winning strategy. The best yearly production is between 10 and 20 degrees now. Moving up in the world to 15 degrees latitude, a 20-degree tilt is still the best monthly balance and the best yearly output. Moving into Mexico at 20 degrees latitude, we start to see more spread in the production in the winter months. Even though 20 degrees produces the most power for the year, you might favor a 30-degree tilt if you're trying to improve your winter production. 25 degrees latitude moves us into the US at Miami, Florida. The shallow carport angles are now a compromise setup with dramatically lower production in the winter months. 30 degrees, which is the same as my array, now provides a nice consistent production over the entire year, and it produces an optimal yearly production at 16 megawatt hours. The vertical setup has started to increase in performance, but it is still dead last. Moving up the panhandle to approximately 30 degrees latitude. Once again, 30-degree tilt gives a fairly even production throughout the year and a good yearly output at 15 megawatt hours. At 35 degrees, I ran a weather experiment. I picked two locations with drastically different solar irradiance, Phoenix, Arizona and Atlanta, Georgia. From this solar irradiance map, you can see that Phoenix has some of the best solar exposure in the US. I expected to see some amazing results. But you can see from the yearly production graph that we're maxing out at about 15 megawatt hours for the year, and that's about the same as all the other locations we've checked so far. Then I ran Atlanta, Georgia. It was so good, it blows past the scaling on my chart. It blows away not only Phoenix, but all of the other locations from the equator to the Arctic Circle at 19 megawatt hours. The optimal angle of 30 degrees is no different, but the total yearly production at every other angle is better. Rescaling the chart allows us to see the entire year a little bit better. In this case, I believe the biggest factor between these two locations is actually temperature. If you look at the temperature data for both locations, you can see more sun comes with more heat, and heat is the enemy of solar production. There are a couple of takeaways here. One, if you live in Atlanta, Georgia, it should be really easy to justify solar. And if you live in Phoenix, you could likely significantly increase your production by some active cooling on your panels. If you're going to build an open rack array, I always recommend using bifacial panels based on all of my research. And if you're looking for low-cost bifacial panels, Signature Solar is a great resource. If you use my code and my affiliate link in the description, you can get $50 off an order of 500 or more. You can get a discount and you can help out my channel. It's a win-win. You can find Signature Solar links and discounts as well as a lot of other sources and options on my website, projectswithdave.com. A curious thing happens as we move into my neck of the woods at 40 degrees latitude. The yearly production for the vertical panels picks up, and all the other angles falls. The yearly max production is now only about 14 megawatt hours. Even though the production is significantly less here in Ohio, I was able to pay off my DIY system in less than 5 years. You can find the videos for the install, performance, and cost of my system as well as many other systems on my website, projectswithdave.com. The analysis I did for vertical panels in my yard yielded results that were even flatter than these aggregated results, but I only have 1 year of actual data. I'll bring an update when I have a lot more data to share. My main open rack array is tilted at 30 degrees, and that's as steep as that racking system will go. Considering I exceed my needs in the summer and underproduce in the winter, if I had it to do over again, I would probably go with an angle somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees. That would help the snow shed faster and give me better winter production without too much compromise in the summer production. Moving up 5 degrees of latitude to Portland, Oregon, the curves start to shift dramatically. The summer peaks are actually higher, but the winter is also much lower. The max total production has dropped to 12 megawatt hours, and there is much less difference between the different tilt angles. As you move further north, it starts to make sense to go with a very steep or even vertical arrangement. 60 degrees would be a good choice here. It gives you good snow shedding with near max performance in the winter and very little compromise in the summer. Also, 60 degrees is about the steepest you can go with fixed tilt systems. At 60 degrees latitude, we move into Canada with a very similar graph. I would probably target 60 degrees here as well for the best balance, but vertical starts to make a lot of sense with all the snow. Moving further north into Canada at nearly 55 degrees latitude, the angles are all starting to merge together. It starts to become easy to justify a vertical system to avoid winter losses from snow coverage. Likely summer power consumption is low since you don't need a lot of cooling energy, so there is no need to maximize summer production like you would in the south. As we move above the 60 degree latitude mark with Anchorage, Alaska as a reference point, the graph now looks completely different. The production at every tilt angle is almost exactly the same. The production in winter is very low. There are 4 months of the year that are at or below 400 kilowatt hours, and that's not great. And yet, the summer months are some of the highest of all of our charts, over 1,800 kilowatt hours in May. Only Atlanta, Georgia has a higher peak output. Having lived in Anchorage, I can tell you that it is entirely due to the very long cool summer days and almost complete lack of sunlight in the winter. Here it becomes very obvious the best choice is vertical. 40 to 50 degrees has slightly more performance over the year, but with vertical, you don't have to clean off the snow. And in fact, you'll see buildings in Anchorage and the surrounding areas with panels mounted on the face of the building. It's a great solution. You don't have to worry about how deep the snow is. You don't have to worry about high wind loads since the building is the backstop. Of course, these results don't exactly represent that, because if you mount them on a building, the performance would not be quite as good as shown here, since you're missing out on the bifacial effect with the building blocking the back side. There is a commercial installation I visited in Willow, Alaska. Not only are the panels not vertical, but they are at a fairly shallow angle for being that far north. I guess it's because the site is surrounded by trees. It's probably not the best location for a solar plant to begin with. If you're finding this content helpful, consider buying my wife a coffee by hitting the Super Thanks button or using the donation link on my website, projectswithdave.com. I don't drink coffee, but my wife does. And with my boys grown up and married, my wife is helping me a lot more. And we could bribe her to just continue supporting the channel so I can keep making great content for you. Hey, it's a win-win, right?
I'm fine with
Can you
that.
come on just a little bit?
I don't want to be in your video.
You have to be.
I don't want to be.
The Arctic Circle is at 66.5 degrees latitude, running through the top third of Alaska. And here you can get a decent production from April to July. But there are now 3 months of the year with zero or near zero production. Like me, you might have been expecting vertical to do better and better the farther north we go. But as it turns out, that is not the case. Vertical is no longer the obvious choice here. In fact, you might choose 50 degrees if winter production is not a priority for you. Solar here really only makes sense if you only need energy in the summer. For instance, you might have a remote cabin that's only used in the summer months. Dead Horse is at the northern edge of Alaska, about 70 degrees latitude. The results are very similar, but slightly worse than the Arctic Circle. A 40 or 50 degree tilt will give you the best summer production, and since you really can't produce anything in the winter anyway, there's no need to worry about the snow. Be sure to access all the free resources I have on my website, projectswithdave.com. If you want to see more on optimizing your solar production, watch this video series right here. If you want to see step-by-step how to install a solar system, watch this series of videos right here. I have lots more solar analysis, equipment testing, and solar projects coming in the future, so be sure and subscribe so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.